All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. There are very few places on Earth that can literally make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up just by hearing their name. We are, of course, talking about the deeply mysterious case of the Conjuring House in the USA. It's that infamous, incredibly mysterious farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island. Now, we've all seen the media, right? We know the story of the Perron family, and we know that the legendary demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren brought this whole nightmare to the world's attention. But today, we're going to revisit this location through a completely different lens. We're using the source material to uncover a deeply unsettling alternative narrative that sets a totally different eerie tone.
So I really want to challenge everything you think you know about Ed and Lorraine Warren and that whole legendary Bathsheba story. What if the narrative we were all sold was just a massive cover-up? The source material we are examining today actually suggests that the popular story might be completely fabricated, just to hide a much, much darker reality. According to this account, Ed and Lorraine Warren never actually cleansed that house. The source material reveals this wild contrast to the Hollywood myth we're all so familiar with. Rather than battling a witch named Bathsheba or casting out your standard run-of-the-mill demon, the alternative historical record suggests the Warrens actually trapped something far worse down in that basement. They literally couldn't defeat it, so they just bound it. And to understand exactly how the secret was unearthed, we have to look at a modern-day investigation that went horribly, horribly wrong.
Okay, moving into part 1, Carter's Paranormal Challenge and the Skeptic's Downfall. Our main subject here is a guy named Carter. He was a massive YouTube skeptic whose entire brand was built on debunking haunted locations. He was absolutely not a believer. He was a pure analyst. And, driven by a dare from his 2 million subscribers, he committed to sheer isolation. We're talking 7 full days and nights completely alone inside the Conjuring House. No camera crew, no producer, absolutely no backup. Just one guy trying to logically dismantle one of the most famous paranormal mysteries in the United States.
Now, Carter didn't just casually stroll in there with a flashlight. As a hardcore investigator, he brought an incredibly technical setup designed to definitively debunk this place. He completely rigged the house. He set up 10 stationary night vision cameras, thermal scanners to track temperature drops, EMF readers for electromagnetic fields, and he even wore a 24/7 live streaming backpack so his massive audience could monitor his every single move in real time. Basically, he was 100% prepared to catch any trickery.
Which brings us to part 2, the hidden basement tape and the Night 3 anomaly.
What's really interesting about truly malevolent locations is how they lull you into a painfully boring, false sense of security at first. So let's track the forensic timeline of how this escalated. After 2 days of absolutely zero activity, at exactly 1:45 a.m. on day 3, Carter headed down into the basement just to swap out a camera battery. But the air down there was freezing, like drastically colder than the rest of the house. As he was crouching in the dirt, his flashlight caught an anomaly. At 1:47 a.m., he noticed one old wooden floorboard wasn't nailed flush. It was just slightly lifted. So he uses his pocket knife to pry it open, and buried right there in the cobwebs was a small, rusted iron lockbox. Carter actually smashed the rusted lock with a loose brick he found and popped the lid open. But inside, it wasn't a creepy doll or a spellbook. It was just a single, dusty cassette tape. And written right across the label in faded black Sharpie was a pretty chilling warning. 1973, Ed and Lorraine Warren, do not play. Now, a normal person, they'd probably run away at this point. But Carter, being a dedicated content creator, digs out a vintage cassette player, sits right down in front of his live stream camera, and presses play.
Now, before we get into what was actually on that tape, we really need to define the true nature of the horrifying entity that Ed and Lorraine secretly bound to the house. The source material defines this thing as a mimic. Basically, it's a malevolent entity that steals the exact voices of loved ones to lure and trap its victims. It literally uses your own psychology, your own trust right against you.
So as the tape plays, the static clears, and Carter hears Lorraine Warren's frantic whispered warning. She actually confesses that they let the press believe the whole thing was Bathsheba purely as a cover-up. She explicitly states, "It's a mimic. It steals our voices. Do not open the door." And immediately following that warning on the recording, Ed Warren's voice cuts in screaming in absolute terror for Lorraine to get out because the entity was already using his voice. And then the tape just clicks dead. Carter was completely paralyzed. He glances at his laptop, totally expecting his skeptic audience to be spamming fake or scripted in the chat. But instead, his live stream chat is scrolling at lightning speed with these identical, terrified warnings. His viewers were seeing something that he couldn't. They were pleading with him to look behind him, screaming in all caps about a shadow on the stairs.
Let's dive into part 3, the Mimic's Trap and Surviving the Witching Hour.
Before Carter could even turn his head around, a massive, booming power outage plunges the entire house into freezing darkness. Carter checks his watch. It's 3:06 a.m. Pure survival instinct kicks in. He grabs his camera and his laptop by the cables and literally sprints up the wooden stairs toward the main floor. He reaches the heavy wooden front door precisely at 3:07 a.m., which is the exact peak of the paranormal witching hour. His hand is hovering right over the brass knob.
And right at that exact split second, 3 massive, booming knocks hit the door from the outside. The source describes them as heavy and solid, sounding like they could literally splinter the wood. Carter stumbles backward, drops his gear, and is faced with the ultimate question. Who or what is on the other side of that front door?
Then, a muffled, desperate voice calls out from the front porch, pleading, "Hey, is anyone in there? Please open the door. I'm locked outside in the dark. Please." And Carter's blood just ran ice cold, because the desperate voice begging for help out on that porch wasn't a stranger. The exact pitch, the exact cadence, the exact panic, it was Carter's own voice.
Finally, part 4, the horrifying aftermath and the missing investigator. Lorraine Warren's warning about not opening the door was echoing in his mind. But here is the true psychological horror of this entire mystery. If the entity stealing his voice was currently standing outside on the front porch, then what had his entire live stream chat been seeing standing right behind him in the basement? When the Rhode Island State Police showed up for a welfare check the very next morning, the physical evidence they found was chilling. The front door was still deadbolted from the inside. Carter's laptop was smashed in the hallway. That warning cassette tape was crushed into pieces near the basement stairs. But Carter himself was completely missing. And honestly, the most disturbing part? That loose floorboard down in the basement had been nailed back perfectly flush, almost like it had never even been touched.
The absolute only clue left behind to explain what happened to this guy was the horrific final 15 seconds of audio they recovered from a local live stream server. The video feed was pitch black, but the audio was crystal clear. It recorded the sound of a camera hitting the floor, which was immediately followed by a scream. But it was a scream coming out of 2 entirely different mouths at the exact same time. The mimic had sprung its trap. The Conjuring House is actually still standing today, and people are constantly booking overnight stays looking for Bathsheba. But the source material leaves us wondering if maybe they're just walking straight into the trap of something far worse that's still waiting down in that basement. So I'll leave you with this final thought to take away from our explainer today. If you were isolated for 7 days and you heard a knock at 3 a.m., could you survive? Next time you hear a knock in the dark, you better make absolutely sure the voice asking for help isn't coming from inside your own throat.